Good morning. Welcome to the Library of Congress and the Family Mystery Day. This event is the Spooky Things Just Outside with Jerry Spinelli and Ben Hatke. My name is Rochelle Shore, and I am a high school ESOL teacher in Northern Virginia, but mainly I'm a book lover. Before we get started, just a few logistical things to get out of the way. After we have finished our discussion, we will have a question and answer session. Then at 12:30, both authors will be in the mezzanine level above the Great Hall for a book signing at 12:30. So when we're done discussing here, you have plenty of time to go down and pick up a couple of books. They'll have copies of Dead Wednesday and Things in the Basement. Maybe you could get both for a book signing. So, we're going to get started. Thank you so much for being here. And we're going to talk about these two books. We have Worm from legendary children's writer Jerry Spinelli's new novel, Dead Wednesday. Here it is, if you haven't seen it yet. We'll also meet Milo from Ben Hatke's graphic novel, Things in the Basement. Worm and Milo have major issues to worry about, like when Worm has to ponder how to deal with the ghost girl who makes herself a cozy home inside his head. Milo faces a whole world of terrors in his new home's basement. He slowly discovers things that reside there that are only steps away from his bedroom. Can Milo summon his courage to go into the creepy basement? Can Worm find it in him to follow where the ghost leads and ignore his family and friends? So, to get us started, could you tell us a little bit about your books and your main character and what makes them so brave? If we could start with Jerry.
Possibly the most interesting part about the story is not the story itself, but how it originated, and it came by way of a letter from Texas. Years ago, a teacher wrote to me, said, I teach in a middle school, and we have an interesting thing every year. We call it Dead Wednesday. And it's our attempt to try to reach kids before they get to high school and keep them on a safe path, insulate them from fatal mistakes that can happen so easily to older teenagers. And so she said each kid becomes, each eighth grader becomes, for one day, for one Wednesday, becomes a dead student. A student who has died somewhere in the state during that year. And that student becomes the deceased kid. And so for all intents and purposes, that day, that student is dead. Puts on a black shirt, walks through the hallways, sits in classes, and no one speaks to them. They are totally ignored. Even the townspeople contribute. And the idea is to make an impression on them. And that's about all the teacher said. She said, maybe you could use this someday. Well, I put that letter away, and then about 5, 6, 7 years later, I remembered it. And I went looking for the letter, and I couldn't find it. And I cannot find it to this day. but I remembered what I just told you. And if nothing else, I recognize a good story when I see one. And so I just sat down and cooked up some stuff to go with it. I had never thought of myself as a writer of a ghost story. But here was an invitation, if there ever was one. And by the time I was finished transforming that teacher's letter into a novel, it became one that I called Dead Wednesday. And I have the acknowledgments here. I guess they're at the end. Thank yous. And I can't, I said, most thankfully and regretfully, my deepest appreciation to the teacher whose name and letter I've lost. She planted the seed. I'm still waiting for her to discover this book.
So maybe
and say, Mr. Spinelli, did you get a letter from me? It hasn't happened yet, but I'm ever hopeful. In the meantime, that's the, people are always asking, where do stories come from? Well, that's where this one came from.
Thank you. I sure hope that this teacher hears about this. Maybe everybody could pass the word and get back to you about that. That would really be amazing.
Maybe if it becomes a movie. People are not impressed with books until they become movies, it seems.
And how about your character, Milo, and his bravery?
Wow, that was a fascinating story. I love the idea of books coming from things, and then we can't put our finger on where the original seed is, and the letter has disappeared. I love it. That is fantastic. Milo, I think a lot about bravery being not being unafraid, but working on acting even though you are afraid. And so that's, and also taking kindness as your first reaction to things as much as you can, even if they are scary. So I think that was sort of like, that's at the core of like, I think what I was doing with Milo. Mm-hmm. And I also, I grew up in a historic home, very, very like an old Victorian house, and we did have like a really dark basement with this dirt floor and a little coal chute that was closed off and all this, and the furnace was like crouched in the back of the basement and would periodically come on noisily, and it was a kind of a spooky space. And so like a little bit of that is in that is one of the germs of the story, and visually. One of the things that was a fun challenge in telling Milo's story was Milo has this kind of mop of hair that goes down over his eyes, and when I was sharing some of the early work on this book with other cartoonists, it was Vera Brosgol said, "You're doing this and not showing the character's eyes? That's amazing!" Like she was like, "That's a challenge," and I was like, "Yes." And I really love. Trying to get gestural storytelling down. So a lot of Milo's reactions, like it's a little easier when you're showing full face, right? But I really wanted to zero in on how we communicate body language when we're afraid, we're brave. All of this, there's definitely a whole catalog of gestural storytelling in there. So that's a bit of what I was trying to do with Milo. I love the challenge of trying to do storytelling and bring emotion into characters that maybe have as few moving parts as possible, or maybe like little bits of challenge. Like one of the creatures that Milo meets in this underworld that he travels into is just an eyeball with tentacles.
Oh, I loved
Weepy. Just an eyeball with tentacles. And again, like things come from all bits of your life. somewhere along the line, when I was growing up, my parents helped us with costumes. They were really big into supporting us when we had weird costumes. We did find a big ball and turn it inside out, and I made an eyeball costume for one
I
Halloween.
don't know if you can see it very well.
Eyeball
but-
with tentacles, I don't know. But how to tell how a creature like that is feeling or what it's thinking with sort of that minimal amount of information or...
And I love how his tears
Yeah,
lead
yeah.
them to a solution to part of the
Oh
story.
yes, and the tears like find the
Yes.
passages found through this puddle of tears.
And he's
So,
just always crying.
Yeah, so that's the kind of the grain of Milo in his journey.
Yeah. And so we've already started talking about where your stories come from, and maybe talk about your craft. How is it that you set up? Do you write every day? Do you start with an outline? Why don't Ben? Why don't you go ahead?
Oh, boy. Well, I was really interested in what your writing day looks like. I can definitely talk about this, but I want to hear about everybody's like kind of routine. I would love that. But for me, graphic novels are funny because you're both writing and drawing. So I definitely start with an outline. I definitely start with a notebook and a sketchbook. And in the notebook, I'm doing a lot of longhand writing because I like to have a solid outline before I start drawing finished pages. If you don't do that, you can start to look, because I've done some prose work as well, and prose work, if you see something's not working, you can hit the backspace button and rewrite it, and physically, it can be complicated, but physically it's not as taxing as looking at a page and thinking like, oh, now I like the way this page looks, and now I have to pitch it and go back to this page. That's not a fun feeling. So I do like to have a solid outline. So the visual development goes into a sketchbook, writing development goes into a notebook until I have kind of a solid outline, and then start to come together.
Okay.
The next step for a comic is to thumbnail the whole thing. I make little scribbly drawings that are barely legible of the entire book,
Okay.
with the dialogue written in on the side. And then I will, I used to scan them, now I just snap them with my phone and put them together into a PDF, and they're unreadable. So I go through those with my editor, and I actually just get on the phone and we do story time, where I will, but at that point it feels like the book is essentially done, like the story has been told, and we go, and we go back and I'll fix up the thumbnails.
Okay.
And then and then the final step then is almost feels like post-production in a movie, where you've shot all the principal photography. The thumbnails feel like principal photography for a film. And then I really like it's a little bit more. It's less emotionally fraught when you're just making pages. Feels like just you already have your map from your thumbnails.
Okay.
And then you're just trying to turn those little thumbnails into nice finished page artwork that ends up being the finished product.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So.
I have to say I'm a little, I admire and I'm a little envious of the linguistic economy that you can achieve with pictures. Sometimes I can tend to get too wordy sometimes, as my wife will tell you, and a picture really is worth 1,000 words, and I like how you allow the story to show itself instead of interfering with a bunch of words and telling us what we're seeing. As you know, there's a sacred saying among writers, which is show, don't tell. That means you allow the story to tell itself, to show itself. You show what's happening. You show your character being sad, rather than say Johnny was sad. And you try to keep that in mind. And we novelists do the best we can, but they cheat.
Well, I will tell
They just draw pictures. and you know, it takes me a month to say what he can say in an hour with a well-drawn picture.
I do admire it, though, because I've been doing more prose work, and I have found exactly that, where you know, your character is having some kind of emotion, and I've gotten so used to be able to just, like, with the gestural work, there's this. You know, and like I've gotten my gestural work to the point where it's like, okay, in a panel I can just go, you know, like that deflated feeling. And to pull that off in prose is really tricky.
Yeah.
Really tricky.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, try it sometime. But in terms of getting back to your question, where the stories come from, I've already given you a good example. But other than that, a story idea, I think of it as a kind of mosquito that bites you, and you might be bitten by an idea at any time. Your first job as a writer, and this is the way I tell young writers, your first job has nothing to do with a keyboard. Your first job is to pay attention, to keep your eyes and ears open, to pay attention. It doesn't have to be to any place exotic. It can be just behind your back, your own backyard, your own street. Pay attention. Your own boring neighbors. And begin to notice the things that everybody else is missing. And that's the beginning of being a writer. And you can go from there. An idea might snap on you just like that. It might be a recollection of a chant that you used to say in 4th grade during recess on the playground. 1st grade babies, 2nd grade cats, 3rd grade angels, 4th grade rats. I was shopping around for my next book idea once, and I recalled that. And then I repeated the last line, 4th grade rats. And now, if that's not the title of a book, I don't know what is. And so that became a book. That one I wrote in a month. Stargirl took 32 years. Not that I was writing it the whole time, but it went from everything in the 1960s, when I made my original notes, about a kid who lived underground, like in a tunnel or a subway. And it morphed over the years into the book that is now on the shelves called Stargirl. I don't know exactly how that happened, but it took a third of a century for the whole process to be complete. So each title, each book has its own foundation story and its own timing. And I try not to get too routine about it, but to let the story The story starts as an idea, and what I like to do, people say, who do you write for? I don't write for anybody. I write for the story. I take the idea out to lunch. I buy it lunch. We sit down, we have a conversation. I start asking it questions. How do you want me to write you? How do you feel? What makes you tick? And when the story starts talking back to me, then I know I'm on my way. And as long as I can satisfy the needs of the story that I took to lunch, then hopefully you all will come to read.
Thank you. We were talking before we came out, and we were talking about passions and the passions we have. And, you know, so often we tell our young people to go for your passion and just go for it. But what do you do when your passion turns into your work? You know, it's what you're doing every day. Is it still your passion? And what do you do for fun then if your passion is your work?
I mean, I don't know. I just feel incredibly fortunate to be able to have, to be able to use my work as, because what you were saying about keeping your eyes open, right? That really is the key to finding stories and to have that kind of practice as part of your work, that kind of like that openness, that it's really a gift to have somewhere to put all of that. It's a place to put tragedy in your life as well. I've found like all these things that are happening in your life, you have this sort of like funnel and lens, and there's like an onerous aspect to it. It has its difficulties, but I'm more grateful than anything else to be able to have a craft that is so tied into the act of like living that I don't know what else to say about it than that. And I also, but it is like you know, there are physical aspects to it. Like I still do most days love just the act of sitting down at a desk and scribbling in a notebook or drawing, right?
Okay.
But there are times when, like we were talking about, I see my eldest daughter go out with her nature journal, and I think like, oh, she's just running outside drawing plants and animals for fun. And you know, at the end of a work day, I'll be like, well, you know, I've drawn like 5 pages today. I don't want to do that. But I have been, but I think also drawing from like I'm really focusing on the art aspect of storytelling. But I do think that drawing from life is, well, both aspects. You, as a storyteller, the only thing that you have is your lived experience. That's the only real unique thing you have.
Right.
So you do draw from life in that aspect, in that sense. But also like visually drawing from the world around you is also important, and that's something that like my daughter reminds me to do, and that I have been working, I think, lately to remind myself to do. I'm a huge fan of Leonardo da Vinci and take a lot of inspiration from his life, and he was known for carrying a sketchbook always on his belt. And I've been trying to.
Is that why you carry one?
Yeah, I mean,
I
this
saw
is
that
this is
earlier.
my Leonardo. I designed. My sister made this. She's a leather worker.
Oh, that is so
And
cool.
originally it was for a belt, but I've found that I like to have it strapped on. But we designed this together as a little outbound sketch kit, and it has helped me remember to bring my sketchbook with me, to sit down and sketch outside when I can. And it flips open and you've got just the stuff
Oh
you
my
need.
gosh, that is so cool.
And we made a little Vitruvian Man stamp
Oh, wow.
that she stamped onto there. And it helps me remember to, to keep a notebook and to keep a notebook with me and to, in a sense, then you're always working, right? You're always jotting ideas down. You're always thinking, I can use this. And even when monumental life things are happening, there's a part of your brain, a mercenary part of your brain that is thinking, I can use this, like.
Right.
Yeah, like if your niece's or nephew's birthday party goes horribly wrong and everybody's fighting, like that's not a good thing. But part of you's like, ooh, this is a scene. So there, yeah, it does create a little bit of a mercenary part of your brain, I think. But still, I like it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I like that sketchbook. That's a lot better than sticking a notebook in your pocket and then forgetting it and it goes into the wash.
And then it takes the shape of your takes the shape of pocket.
Yeah, that's just not very attractive. Yeah. So.
Yes, she does. She has a weatherworking thing. So if you look her up, yeah.
So maybe during the book signing we could.
Yeah,
I'll
show you her shop address.
For me, it was, I'd say, part of growing up. It was learning that executing your passion does not necessarily exclude hard work.
Yeah.
I have, in high school jobs, carried 100-pound hods of cement on my shoulder up rickety ladders.
Whoa.
And that was harder. That was easier than dragging a pencil across a blank sheet of paper, a half-ounce pencil, to create something that wasn't there before. So I had to come to terms with the notion that this thing that I thought I wanted to do, that seemed so cool, and I could read other people's books and they did it. Well, I can do it. To discover that it's hard work. People say, what'd you do? Sit around today, get some inspiration? People tend to think that you just sit on your back deck and look at the inspiring sunset, and God delivers the next chapter to you. But writing a story down that hasn't existed before, not making a copy of something else, but creating something new in this world, can be pretty hard stuff. Maybe makes it all the more worth it. So as I say, that's where passion for me met hard work, was in the beginning. And it can become especially challenging if, as in my case, I wrote 4 books over 15 years and nobody wanted them. I used up all that passion and hard work and nobody wanted the result. The 4 books, I sent them out to every publisher. What do you do then? I used to visit more schools, and I would tell kids would tell my audience, like in an auditorium like this, that story. And I would say, so you want to be a writer? Because I had asked them, who wants to be a writer? And half the hands went up. I said, okay, what would you do? You just wrote 4 books over 15 years. Nobody wants them. All you've gotten is enough rejection slips to paper the walls of this building. And what are you going to do now? And I'd get different answers, become a plumber, all kinds of answers. But here's the interesting thing. No matter whether it was the 5,000-seat auditorium at the University of Montana or a group of kids sitting around on the floor in a library in Omaha, the same thing, sooner or later, always happened. Sooner or later, I would pick on a kid, and this would be my kid. The kid would often be tentative because all the other answers were so sure, but he or she would say, write another one? And I knew I had my kid. I said, yeah. I said, sometimes that's what you do. You do the craziest thing of all. You do the thing that makes no sense. You just do another one. And that's any writer can, almost any writer, except for maybe Gordon Corman, whose teacher in middle school sent Scholastic or somebody something that he had written, and bam, he was published before he was out of high school. Right. I hate him. We're good friends. But with that exception, most of us have stories like I do about the hard times and the hard reality of accepting that if you're going to go where your passion is telling you you want to go, it may turn out to be pretty darn hard.
Yeah.
And it's going to test you and challenge you. And you're going to find out if you really meant it when the author came to your school that day and said, anybody want to be a writer? And you raised your hand.
Thank you. I think we're getting time now for questions. I'm hoping that we have a lot of questions in here. Oh, we have one already? Do we have our mic? Hold on just one second. All the way in front.
When is Milo gonna go into the attic?
I'm sorry, could you repeat it?
When is Milo gonna go into the attic?
Oh.
When is Milo going to go
When
into
is
the
Milo
attic?
going to go into the attic?
That's a good question.
That
I
is a
was
good
wondering
question.
that
Good
too.
question, kid.
I have made notes for an attic story, so I have a little stack of notes and artwork for that. So that is entirely possible that would happen. I'm wondering if I should tell you the direction my notes are going. The direction my notes are going is that Milo does not go into the attic in the notes that I've made so far. Because in the book, Milo goes into the basement to get the sock for his twin baby siblings, Leo and Lucy. So far in those notes that I've made, it's actually Leo and Lucy who are a little older and are sent to the attic. Yeah,
Okay.
so that's the direction that story is headed. And I make no promises because it's still in the notebook stage, so
Okay.
we shall see.
If you have any ideas, let him know.
Yeah,
So-
that sounds great. Does anyone else have a question? Oh, we have some right there.
What do you imagine yourself doing if, like, you didn't, like, if you never got, like, your first book published or anything?
Yeah.
I don't know what I would do. It's such a. There are many things that I wanted to do growing up. I was very much into circus skills and performing. So I grew up doing a lot of unicycling and juggling and archery and things like that. Very active. I did a lot of gymnastics growing up. Very early on, I wanted to do like festival children's shows and things like this.
Okay.
For the longest time, I wanted to be try to have my job being Indiana Jones, but just traveling and having adventures and also getting to be like scholarly. Like
Yeah,
that was kind of my like that was the character that split the bookishness with the like outbound adventure for me. But now I've realized that I don't know. It feels like I've got like the books have actually been good that way, in that it's the unexpected thing for me in publishing was that it's given me opportunities to go out and actually given me opportunities to travel to places that I would
Okay.
not otherwise have been able to travel.
True.
So there has actually even been an element of that to it,
Okay.
completely unexpectedly.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know. It feels like this is my best place. I don't know.
Wow.
I'm certainly happy where I am, but I had no intention of being here. When I was this girl's age, I wanted to be a shortstop for the Phillies. I wanted to be a major league ball player. I didn't read. I'm telling you kids, don't follow my example. I have a book called Maniac McGee, and Maniac carries a book everywhere he goes. He does that because I didn't. And it was my attempt to try to make amends and do it right.
Okay.
The closest I could come was doing it right in the story. And so I had him do it. But I remember when I was applying to college, and a college said, list 3 novels that you've read, 3 books that you have read. And I could only list 2. There I was a senior in high school. I could only list 2 books that I had ever read. I didn't read. I like to read, but I didn't spend any time doing it. I'd rather play ball. So this was a happy. One day I wrote a poem about a football game, and it was published in the local paper. And I started to think of myself as a writer after that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Do you have any tips for newer writers? For like dialogue or just pacing in general?
Could you repeat it just to make sure I get it?
Hmm?
Could you repeat the question one time?
Do you have any tips for newer writers for dialogue or pacing in general?
For pacing? Okay.
Did you say tips? Yeah. I have one golden rule. Because we could sit up here and give you 100 rules and turn you into a pretzel, trying to keep it all straight. So I boil it down to one golden rule, and I think everything would fall into place if you stick by it, and that is write what you care about. You can actually make a list, 1 to 5, things that you care about. Because chances are, if you write what you care about, you're going to put your best stuff is going to wind up in it. The commas might be wrong, but most likely you're going to put the best of yourself into that effort if you care about it. And you're going to wind up doing your best work.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just say create every day. For me, it's writing and drawing. Like you get good at what you do every single day, and then you don't have to worry about getting good at it, because if you actually make the habit of doing whatever it is, it doesn't matter the skill. If you're doing something every day, you will invariably make steps forward. And storytelling in general, yeah, there's so many things you could say, but just if you're writing in your notebooks, just make sure things are happening. It's really easy to just try to, for me, it's really easy to get stuck in, trying to craft the feeling of this story that you want, but really, like, make sure things are happening with characters, always.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions? I think we have one down here. Oh, we have one. Sorry.
How many sketchbooks have you filled out?
I think I have about 60 or so full ones on my shelf in my office. That definitely wouldn't. That's definitely not my lifetimes of sketchbooks, but those are the ones that I currently have kept, and are on the shelf in the storage, which I do refer back to sometimes. I like the page. I do actually. With 60 now, it's getting to the point where I can open them up and be like, oh, I remember that. What a weird. Yeah. Anyway.
Do you usually like go through one sketchbook every book?
Oh, no. Sometimes I have a sketchbook that's dedicated to a certain book, but most of the times I allow anything into my sketchbooks. Like I really think my idea of sketchbooks and notebooks are like they're there so that you lean over them and they're there to catch ideas as they fall out of your head. And the deal is to fill them and not worry about whether the stuff is good or bad or even sticking to one story. So usually at the end of a sketchbook, when I get to the end of it, now, I didn't always do this. I'm slightly more organized, slightly than I used to be, and now I tend to put a label on the front of them. When it was started, when it was finished, and a couple of the projects that are mentioned in it.
I was just going to ask if you date your notebooks. Or
I do now.
You do now. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
I'm just interested in hearing from Jerry, and maybe Ben, you might have a thought on this too, but certainly, Jerry, since you started writing, children's publishing has changed vastly. And, you know, we just had Ann Patchett and Kate DiCamillo here on stage Thursday night. And Anne was talking about the writer's job is just to write. You don't worry about the selling of the book or the publicity or the sales or anything like that. But children's publishing has changed so much. I wonder if for either of you, thinking about who your audience is and who's actually going to buy the books is part of your work, or do you just, when you're sitting down to draw or write, are you just thinking about the story?
I would say for me, it's decidedly not part of my process. That's the one thing I've adjusted, made necessary adjustments here and there to reality. But I started out, those first 4 books that nobody wanted, I was writing them for what I thought were what might be called target audiences. I took them out of the headlines because they were popular things that were happening. And so I tried to ride the coattails of that stuff. And finally, the first book, the 5th book that I wrote, the first one that got published, was no forethought at all. I found some half-eaten fried chicken in my refrigerator when I went to get my lunch to take to work one day. And that became the first page of the book that became Space Station 7th Grade, my first published book. I wasn't writing it for anybody. In fact, I thought I was writing it for, if anybody, for adults. But it turned out that they said, this is about a 13-year-old kid. Grown-ups won't read this book. You just wrote a kid's book. And so I wound up in the kids world. And here I am. No, I just write the story as best I can. And the way I look at it, I just put the bowl, it becomes a bowl of milk that I put out on the porch. And then I go back in the house, and whoever wants to comes up and like the neighborhood cats, take something from the bowl, and I don't care what age they are. I just don't get into the business of it. I know some of my books are sold on the adult shelves. of stores in other bookstores in other countries, which I love. I love to get mail from 60-year-olds.
I've been thinking
How
about
old
picture
were
books.
you when you started writing?
Ooh.
I'm sorry, what was that?
How,
How old were you when you started writing?
Oh, when I wrote that poem about the football game that was published in the local newspaper, I was 16. Before that, I wanted to be a baseball player. After that, I wanted to be a writer.
I don't really remember a time when I wasn't scribbling down drawings and writing down ideas. The question earlier about one of the things that you might have wanted to be, even early on, the one job I really thought would fit me that has disappeared, well, it hasn't disappeared, but I really wanted to be a newspaper cartoonist for the longest time. 'Cause when I grew up, I loved Calvin and Hobbes and Garfield, and I grew up in Indiana, and Jim Davis, the creator of Garfield, is from Indiana. And when I was about 12, I think I wrote him a letter, and I got a very short response back, but it mentioned the thing that was mentioned in my letter, which is about Stretch the chicken, which was in Garfield for a hot minute.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I was like, and then I actually I thought, oh, Universal Syndicates. I put like cartoon, comic strip things out there, and I'm really, really glad that wasn't where it ended up for me. I'm much happier telling diverse long form stories than I would be on a comic strip for 10 years. But I don't remember when the old Victorian house that I grew up in. Oh, see, we've got 2 minutes.
Yeah, we got to.
I went back and visited it once, and they happened to be taking down the wallpaper in the room that used to be my little sister's room, and underneath the wallpaper, they found drawings that I had drawn on the walls, which answers the question why my parents put the wallpaper up. So, I don't know.
So you've been drawing for a very long
Pretty long. They were really...
time. Yes. I want to thank everyone for coming this morning. I guess it's afternoon now. We are going to take a bit of a break, and we hope that you'll come back over to, where are we going to be? The mezzanine above the Great Hall for the book signing. I hope you'll come back around, but thank you very much for joining us for this part of the Mystery Day at the Library of Congress. Thank you.
Thank you.